and welcome back to the blogspot.com. Tim, what's the latest news as we march over the cliff to World War III? And of course, we talked in the first hour with Carl Gallups about his latest book, which is Understanding the Trumpet Days of Revelation, Final Warning. And every day when you do your blog or when you come on the program here at NUTRIMEDICAL, you're giving some final warnings from a historical, geopolitical analysis. And the witness to the intellect plus the witness to the spirit that matches up exactly with the Bible tells us that something terrible is about to happen, not only to America and the world, unless we repent. What's the latest news?
Well, I don't agree with Pope Francis on a lot of things, but there was one statement he made that I have to agree with him, and it's more apparent day by day. And that is, he says, we're already in the Third World War. It's just piecemeal at this point. And when you look across the geopolitical, geostrategic environment, you can see it if you understand that we're in the early stages of the Third World War. Things begin to make a lot more sense, and the separate things happening in the Middle East and Asia and Europe and so forth all kind of come together. Kerry, the Secretary of State, who, when he was running for president, was shocked to find out he was really Jewish, although his brother's a rabbi. But anyway, Kerry has warned Iran over supporting the Houthi rebels in the latest place to have a war in the Middle East, Yemen. Now, they're rebels, but only in the sense that their leader was overthrown by one of our guys. So and I say our, it's not the American people, it's the globalists and Zionists that are controlling our government. Our guy, and then he was overthrown after a few months by the so-called rebels. Anyway, we have two supercarrier battle groups plus an assault carrier battle group right off of Yemen now. The Iranians sent a guided missile destroyer and a support ship. Now, they would go to the bottom very quickly, although depending on what technology they have on board, they might be able to do some damage to some of our ships, but especially if they attack first. The thing in Yemen kind of surprised most people. It came out of nowhere, although it's been festering. It's been one of these many places in the Middle East that's been festering for some time. It, like many different events happening, has the potential to become a trigger for something much bigger, and it could become a trigger practically overnight, or it could drag on for quite some period of time. And, really only time will tell. The Royal Saudi Air Force has bombed Yemen's defense ministry in one of their latest attacks. It's actually one of the first attacks where they actually targeted a military site. They've been targeting civilians and doing a pretty good job of killing and maiming innocent men, women, and children. But anyway, the United States Air Force is directly involved because we're providing air refueling for these Saudi planes, which include F-15s. They include the Tornado air defense variant, as well as the Tornado ground attack variant. This Royal Saudi Air Force, at least in terms of equipment, is one of the best in the world. And Iran's leader has accused the Saudi kingdom of genocide over the Yemen strikes. What really this is a battle between the Iranian kind of alliance and the Saudi alliance, and they are fronting for, the United States, United Kingdom, Israel, but really the globalists and Zionists on one hand, and Russia, Belarus, China, and Iran on the other hand. So it's another proxy war.
Right. So, but what you're saying basically, Tim,
area.
Yeah, what you're saying basically is you're laying it out as a historian, as a geopolitical, as a chessboard analyst, that despite people trying to pretend it's otherwise than what it is we are marching very rapidly toward a thermonuclear, biological, and chemical war that will end humanity on planet Earth.
Well, by design. Although,
by design.
Yeah, I think the globalists being Luciferian, and Lucifer is the father of all lies, have the people at the top have bought into a big one. That is that their technology will eradicate the pollution all over the earth. That's a pretty big engineering feat. And that they'll be able to clean up the hundreds of advanced genetically engineered viruses that will be released. And they'll be able to come out of their underground cities after a fairly short time, months or a year or two, and there'll only be a few 100 million people left, and they'll be basically very controlled by modern slave state technology, and the super elite will be on top of the world and own everything. That's a demonic dream. Essentially what Lucifer seeks to do is to destroy the human race, to have another giant blood orgy, which is what wars are, and organized murder. And he wants to destroy this beautiful blue gem of a planet that God created. As Christians, we know from the last book of the Bible that he will go a long way down that road, but he will not be successful, and Christ will return. By the way, in Iran, the Iranians are now responding to the latest thing from the Obama administration, where they said, well, yes, we'll release the sanctions, but piecemeal, kind of at our own pace, once we get everything from Iran. The Iranians basically rolled over and gave us just about everything we want, but the only reason for them to do this is the removal of sanctions, and they're insisting that the sanctions have to be lifted on the first day of their implementation. And so they're now saying, without sanctions, there's no final deal. So we went through, a long series of negotiations, and Netanyahu coming over here and making a fool out of himself and our senators and congressmen. And it may yet not, really fly. The thing in the Ukraine seems to be heating up. Let's see, let me find the figures here. In the last 48 hours in the eastern Ukraine, the Donetsk Republic reports that there have been 74 ceasefire breaches by the junta army. And, of course, the United States and Canada and several other countries are pouring weapon systems into western Ukraine. Right now, Russia has a fairly small force, a few hundred troops in Moldova doing war games. It happens to be literally on the border, however, with the Ukraine, and it's so. If push comes to shove, Russia will be able to go in at multiple points, and the Belarusians will probably come in from the north. Why? You have to ask yourself, what is it that has drugged the human race to this point where we're looking at the Third World War coming?
They're also fast-tracking it, and I'll throw in a few kind of questions and curveballs here in a minute that... And welcome back, and wow.
Yeah, we just found out my site is being blocked for you.
Yeah.
I can get to it. I'm on WoW.
Yeah, well, what's happening is what's called a DNS, which means you're getting a denial of service. So if I go through alternate ways to get there, I can find your site, but it's actually being blocked.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, well, I say the truth, and I call a spade, and that really tends to upset some people. So,
well, you know, the fact that it's being blocked is actually, if, as I say, if you're getting blocked, it means you're over the. If you're getting flack, it means you're over the target.
That's right. I'm over the target. That's right.
Yeah. So in other words, the powers that be are saying, "My God, what this man has been saying, we're just not going to let it out on the internet." And if I go through alternative sites or way around, I can get to at least part of it. And there's some weird things that showed me.
And by the way, I'm not suicidal, so if you
by the way, what is showing here
myself, I'm an Orthodox Christian. We don't do that.
Right, and here's the other thing: is it's also showing me some really strange dates. It's telling me Monday, April 14th, 2014. It doesn't show me our current date. 2014, yeah.
That's last year.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah, it sure is. And it's not Blogspot, because Blogspot, the reason I keep it on there, not only is it free, they have a really good, security system that keeps most stuff out. And I would be having trouble if it was Blogspot. It's somebody's blocking it in your.
Well, in other parts of the internet,
who's your internet provider?
Cox Cable, but it says here when I go through the alternate site, it says, "Sorry, this page you're looking for this blog does not exist." It shows your picture, yeah. So now let's go over the topics that you have today, because what I want you to do is I want you to cut and paste and email it to me, and I'll post it up on my site. So what you need to do is cut and paste your entire site and send it to me, and I'll post it on our servers, which are incredibly hardened servers in Florida and Atlanta. And we have them replicated and have a memory server, so they can't wipe out the disk drives or anything. It's really expensive what we do to make sure that people can hack in and get into our stuff. We've never been hacked. And the reason is that we use a lot of super care, and they're on database websites. They're not HTML, and they've got all kinds of encrypted blockage and so on to make sure they can't get through.
Yeah,
let's go to the fact that we're having a DNS here.
But, if you upset the right people, I will do that.
We're over the target, so let's drop the bombs now.
Okay, where were we at? We were talking about Yemen, and then in the Ukraine. By the way, in the Ukraine, the rebels, our freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them, they are saying that they are getting clear indications that within 2 months the junta will make a major attack on the Ukraine, a major offense.
You're talking about on the eastern Ukraine, you mean?
Yeah, well, the pro-Russian separatists have been put on full alert for a major offensive that Ukrainian and U.S. military officials will anticipate will happen within the next 2 months.
Russia can't tolerate that.
Ready to kick the war back into high gear.
Well, if there's an attack, basically they've already decimated a lot of their infrastructure and killed a lot of people. If they do that, Russia's going to have to cross the border. They're not just supplying equipment, material, and training for the Russian allied Eastern separatists that basically want sovereign, you want to call it republics that are kind of affiliated with Russia. Most of the population are Russian. What we have is a direct provocation to bring about World War III, because even in a sense, greater trigger of World War than the Middle East is Ukraine.
Well, and it's all tied together. See, that's the thing. That's why I said early on, if you understand that we really are already in the Third World War, economically, financially, but also in a limited sense, in a military sense, with actions in several different places, usually using proxies, kind of like the Spanish Civil War was an early proxy for war between the Soviets and the Nazis. If you look at it from that perspective, things really begin to fall into place.
Right.
So it's not good. I have an article. Russia improves its advanced air defense missiles. U.S. is seeking cyber weapons to counter or spoof them. Here's the thing: Russia, their S-400 system is the best in the world. Their S-500 system, which is almost ready to be fielded, is even more advanced. And the United States has not had a war since the Second World War, when we took control in the air over Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. We haven't fought a war that we didn't have control over the air. There were a couple times in Korea that got a little tough, but we managed. Now we count on that, and depending on how all this plays itself out, who knows? Both sides have systems in space that, in many cases, are very secret. Both sides pretty much have a fairly good idea what the other side has in secret, or think they do, and they've worked on countermeasures, and asymmetrical warfare to get around that. Once we begin to go into a all-out third World War, things could deteriorate and go to hell very quickly, or it could be a protracted struggle. There could even be, as you say, a peace treaty that will delay things for a while. Lots of different scenarios, and I can't begin to tell you exactly what's going to happen. Even the players, the people sitting in the war rooms with their fingers on the buttons, they can't tell you.
Well, what are the other major stories you're covering, Tim? Because I know we're going to have Chris on here at the bottom of the hour. What are the stories?
In Greece, there's 6 days for Greece to offer new reforms, although they did make a very large payment. The Greek prime minister just got back from a meeting with Putin. The Russians say they didn't ask for help, but one of the things that Putin is offering them is the oil pipeline deal with Turkey. Greece will be able to make a lot of money off of that.
I think that's almost a pretty well a done deal right now, from what I hear, that the Greeks are biting.
Yeah,
and the Syriza part is not playing ball with
all this has replications in lots of different ways. This is all part of the Third World War. It's the financial part.
So we decided to upgrade the look of our home.
You know, improve the curve appeal.
We decided to add the look of stone to the exterior.
We really like...
There. Chris, are you there? Okay, we're working on getting Chris. Tim, obviously you're over the, I checked in various sites now, still even on this break, you are having a DNS, or denial of service attack on you, which means whatever other stories you're talking about are really pissing off, excuse my English, I shouldn't have said that, are really ticking off the various parties that don't like this, including the Rothschilds. So I want you to please tell us what other stories you're doing, because obviously when you get this kind of attack, the only people that can do this kind of attack on you are very high-level cybernetic people like the No Such Agency, I call them, the NSA, and various other,
headed by
other lettered alphabet agencies.
General Alexander, but he's retired now. So
what
anyway,
other stories? Let's rock and roll.
A couple other stories. Belarus is offering to sell arms and equipment to Iraq.
It came through.
It came through. What, the email I sent you?
It did indeed, and I now have it sitting right in front of me here, so I can follow you through in these stories, okay, so I can rock and roll and help push this along. Armageddon also means the second coming of Christ is near, exactly.
Yeah, you're up at the very top.
I got it, okay. Kerry warns Iran over supporting Houthi rebels.
Yeah.
Kerry's warning Iran over supporting the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Look, Kerry and these characters, we're supplying and dropping military supplies and equipment to inside the territorial zone that is controlled by ISIL and ISIS. ISIS, I call terrorists, or us. We're supplying them with military equipment this week. At the same time, we're letting Iraqi militia. Let me finish, Tim. Iraqi militia calling in airstrikes on calling in airstrikes
ISIS,
directly.
think about ISIS. ISIS is also the name of a goddess, and of course, I mean that with a small g, not a capital G.
Right.
And she is one of the figures that the Illuminati sometimes give homage to or pray to in their demonic services.
Right.
And I kind of outed that today.
Babylonian fertility's human sacrifice is what you're saying. Yeah, but anyway, anyway, Tim, what I'm trying to say here, by the way, one of the things that I got from one of our listeners is I'll try not to interrupt you and you interrupt me, because when that happens, they hear neither one of us. They only hear scramble. So when I jump in, I have to make a couple things to move this along, because whatever they're doing to you is an attack on this show and an attack against you that's very serious. I take this very seriously, because having a live attack means whatever you're saying is taking off some powers that are incredibly powerful and incredibly evil.
And it's also very illegal and unconstitutional what they're doing, but they could care less.
Right. Well, who cares about the Constitution? These are Satanists. You got the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers that have half a quadrillion dollars. They own basically half the planet, and they basically want the whole rest. And they also want to not only enslave the entire human race, they want to kill off a whole huge chunk of it, cybernetically and genetically enhance themselves as Satanists, just like Ray Kurzweil and these so-called people want to merge with technology and the, quote, the cyber brain of Satanism.
That's
and people don't realize
demonic fantasy, you know.
It's a demonic wet dream of these maniacs. And, the fact that the Saudi Air Force are bombing with our assistance and our GPS coordinates and our drones piloted by our teenagers and young teens and young 20s in Atlanta and other bases around America, are helping Saudi Arabia, these Muslim maniacs, kill other Muslim maniacs.
But they have a real problem retaining people, because after a while, people start realizing I'm killing people, and those are real people. This isn't a game. Those are real people.
But this game is designed to blow up a lot bigger. When right now, for example, people don't realize, and this is something I mentioned on the show a number of times over the years, the very first thing I got before I received the fullness of the book Clay and Iron in the early 90s, before I traveled to 42 cities in Israel, Clay and Iron was a book that I received, literally was dictated by God, told me, face down on the concrete of my basement floor over several days. And I can tell you, the very first event to happen is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The very first major event of this great war is the closure of the Strait. Yeah. When the Strait of Hormuz closes, all Hades is going to break loose. And when the Iran's leader accuses Saudi Arabia of genocide over Yemeni airstrikes, yeah, they're genociding the people with our assistance.
Well, and then I have a picture, and it's one of the most heart-wrenching pictures I've ever seen. It's a little girl sitting next to the body of her mother, and the caption is, "Mr. Rothschild, why did you have to kill my mommy?" And I posted that's on the site today. Maybe that was one of the things that triggered.
Iran is got a deadline, and people need to understand this. June is the deadline. Obama's mentioned this. John Kerry's mentioned it. And this is probably why you're being attacked, because Khomeini said without sanctions being lifted, there's no final deal, which means Iran's saying, you're a move, America. Unless you remove all these restrictions and these sanctions, we don't have a deal. Now, the Iranians, you have to understand, are not going to play fair ball. They've cheated all along for years. They've got uranium enriched well beyond what they need for fuel rods. And so you can't trust the Iran's supreme leader.
With all that oil, why do they need a nuclear power plant? But
they don't. They don't need a nuclear power plant. They do it because they realize, and this is a fact that they learned from the Iraqis. Remember the Gerald Bull supergun? Gerald Bull supergun, which is more advanced than even our missile delivery systems for delivering nuclear missiles, because there's no signature from a launch. For example, if let's say Iraq, Saddam Hussein had two things: the Gerald Bull supergun fully operational, and nuclear materials that could be delivered in space. You can put a Volkswagen in space with his supergun, accelerated at a speed far faster than any launch of any missile on Earth, with no infrared signature indicating by satellite that a launch has been made. The only time you actually,
by the way, to hide a normal missile launch, but most people don't know them, so I'm not going to go into any detail.
But the thing is, if you had this inside a mountain, you can have a missile launch gun launch hundreds of missiles.
They came up with a way to make his weapons, and the Mossad killed Gerald Bull years ago. But they came up with a way using great big steel pipelines for oil pipelines, and of course they weren't strong enough to take the explosive force for the launch. But what they did is they took heavy steel cabling and heated it very hot, and then wrapped it again in a slightly different way, and then kind of like
a basket.
Plywood is very tough because each layer runs in a slightly different way. So there is a way, and a number of Arab governments know this, to make the super gun and to hide it in the ground or in a building. And basically, that incoming round, which can be nuclear, it can be submunitions with fuel air explosives, it can be radiological, bacterial, whatever.
I got to cut in now because we just got Chris on the air now. The reason why I mention that is that if Saddam had these two things, he could have taken out any nation on earth, and there'd be no warning, there'd be no signature. Chris, we're getting a DNS denial of service attack against Tim's site, and I tried every possible way to get access, so he actually had to email me the entire list of articles he has here. And of course we know that what you sent me earlier today and yesterday about what's going on at Fukushima Daiichi, many of the times when we do interviews on this program with your information and information we have from other sources, they're often posted up on E&E News and elsewhere, and they're referenced by other people, including scientists, sometimes after several years, when we've talked about this several years ago, as the factual basis of them saying that nothing's being done, like the latest statement by Fukushima Daiichi people that the technology won't exist for 200 years. And you have some big stories, so when we come back from the break, because I hear the bumper coming,
okay,
you've got to go through these articles because we have a DNS attack against Tim. And we need to know, people need to know, we're going to continue. Tim, I want you to call in tomorrow in the third hour. Ann Morris will be hosting. And Chris, let's hit this here. I think you hit the target there. Luckily, Chris can get your website, but I am getting DNS here on the West Coast. Chris, what are the major stories we're talking about with regard to a number of nuclear issues? Because we talked about this earlier today about what you sent me yesterday.
Well, Dr. Bill, I guess in Unit 3, they're concerned about as obvious damage to the spent fuel pool gates. I know. Here I go again talking about these gates. What are they? They hold the level of the water up above, high above the spent fuel. Remember, they're trying to do what they did in Unit 4, and that is to remove the spent fuel out of Unit 3. And the interesting thing is, I was looking on the E&E News, and because I've been getting this news from other places too, but E&E was nice enough to post previous articles and a link to a previous, when we were on the air, you and I, talking about the spent fuel gates and the concern that I had and my team would have about if you had a catastrophic failure of these, and it looks like there's damage to this pool, they have to address it. You would lose the level of water that's doing a lot of things like cooling the spent fuel, providing shielding so people won't get overexposed that quickly. I mean, right now it's bad enough, but if you lose the level, and also you could also create a criticality accident. So,
well, we know the top of the spent fuel pool number 3 had a criticality and an explosion that drove parts of fuel rod assemblies up to 60 kilometers away. That happened immediately after the tsunami where they lost their power, and they had a hot shutdown. If there's a major loss of the fluid around these fuel rod assemblies and destroyed fuel rod assembly parts, there'll be criticalities that will cause, because it's a plutonium-enriched cooling pool, it means it's very, very likely to have a nuclear explosion there, which will have a very large nuclear dirty bomb blow up on the Fukushima site, which might completely destroy the entire site and spread all the debris in every direction, including all the workers. And people need to be aware that that's a very high probability that they won't just have the top of the reactor cooling pool blow up, but the entire site blow up to pieces with a tremendous amount of plutonium, tritium, and 200 other isotopes spread not only in the ocean, but through the troposphere with a massive death-kill effect downwind. And I call it the mitochondrial apocalypse. So give us some more details about this, about what's happening there.
Well, I mean, there's just no nice story about it. I mean, they've got the spent fuel that's in jeopardy and has been for a while, for a long time. And, of course, the chlorium, which is unknown location, whereabouts, obviously not in the reactor anymore, or most of it, and how far outside the container, which is broken. But, I mean, just so that your listeners know, we brought up this issue in 2012, right? That's in June of 2012, we talked about the spent fuel pool gates, and now it seems that, I mean, I'm glad other people are concerned, but I mean, it's a little late in the game here. It's already 2015, and now we're talking about, from NHK News, the pool gates have shifted. And I mean, it just shows that what we were talking about was pertinent back then and is even more so now.
There's a number of issues that are causing that. The first is the neutron flux is decaying and annealing the metals and the plastics of the sealant around it. Second is the subsidence, which is twisting the entire building and the cooling pool itself. And the third area is they dropped a big chunk of a piece of device material into the cooling pool, which caused a problem. So they not only shifted the gates over that problem, but they also dropped massive piece of falling debris into the pool. Mm-hmm. So what I think is going to happen is when this happens, we already have the death of the Pacific Ocean. I'm going to be bringing on in the next few weeks Dana Durnford. And before I went into medicine in 1973, I was doing my oceanography research on my PhD in marine molecular biology. I didn't write the thesis, but I finished the project in marine bacteriology with Dr. Robert Brown. And we worked at the Bedford Institute and the Woods Hole, Massachusetts Institute in Massachusetts was in collaboration with us in our projects. The oceans are dying. What people need to know, the next is the top of the trees along the Pacific coast will die. And you'll see massive start to have all kinds of what I call zombieizing effects on the human population, where you'll see cardiac arrhythmias, immune system failure, massive increase in breast cancers, because in the animals exposed to high amounts of cesium-137, the most prominent cancer was breast cancer. You're going to start seeing organic brain damage, cardiac arrhythmias, small for dates babies, infertility, and then you're going to start seeing what I call mitochondrial and immune system failure and massive plagues. In other words, the population so weakened that any plague, virus, or pathogen will spread like wildfires through a grass that's dry as tinder and ready for a tiny spark to cause a massive explosive wall of fire in terms of disease. So what I see is we're approaching an ecological extinction level event, and this will be another nail in the coffin of the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, it certainly, it's like it's just another black eye. And how much can you take? I don't know, the answer to that.
There's a thing called the elbow of, if you look at a curve in terms of trauma until finally you get failure. In terms of the genetic script, what happens is that tritium, which doesn't have a half-life, is what's called the final kill shot. The two things that are most damaging to DNA are cosmic rays and tritium. And the reason is tritium causes what's called a DNA intercalation, where it slides one codon pair, and cosmic rays just shatter it. All other radioisotopes can fry or cross-link, causing thymidine dimers, where cross-links thymidine in the DNA. And what's likely to happen is you're going to have so much DNA damage that people won't know they're getting in trouble until they get all of a sudden massive pneumonia, sinus infections, bleeding nose, CNS or cerebral bioaccumulation, cerebral radiation, chronic radiation sickness, or gastrointestinal radiation sickness. And that's why I talked to Michael Murphy this morning. I'm involved with a lawsuit, a federal and world lawsuit we're setting up against the geoengineering of the world climate, because they're putting up nanoparticles that are paramagnetic in the upper troposphere. I took care of pilots that are actually flying and putting this stuff up there, so they told me the truth. One of them gave me the whole truth within a few weeks afterward. He died in what he was foster-sized, which means he killed himself in very unusual circumstances. This is one of the pilots flying out of Peterson Air Force Base in Buckley and Aurora Air Force Base of the large Hercules C-130s. He's one of the mechanics taking care of these aircraft. So what people should understand is what's going on now is this is a global genocide, which is why they're not trying to fix Fukushima, and they're telling us lies that there's no technology whatsoever for 200 years to fix the problem. And the bioaccumulation, even in the next 5 to 10 years, they've already offered 2 years ago to the people of Japan that they could move their entire population of 100 and some million to Brazil. That deal was just finished, finalized. So the Japanese now have already bought giant tracts of land in Kerala, India, and they're actually carving out a large section of Brazil to move Japan and Japanese people and their companies and their factories to Brazil. This is actually happening as we speak right now, and no one in the mainstream media is talking about it because they don't want to tell you that America and Hawaii and the Northern Hemisphere is basically the tailpipe of this monstrosity. We're in the tailpipe. So, and then you have two other stories I want you to quickly talk on. You had not only that story, you have the issue about the Calvert Hills in D.C., which is a large power station near District of Columbia, and they even had to evacuate the White House because of the power blackout that occurred. Talk about this transformer failure that caused the nuclear reactor to lose power.
Can I ask something about that? I posted a comment on my site yesterday about that, and it goes back to this Israeli what they call Spinix, or their software program designed to mess with nuclear power plants.
They can do that, yeah, but this was just a transformer failure. Tell us about it, Chris.
Well, yeah, but they can also get into transformers and cause trouble.
Exactly. The point is, though, whatever's going on here.
The White House and several key government facilities. And my question was this a message from the Mossad to the Obama administration?
Jim, let me just address that really ly, okay? If it were a real terrorist threat, they would have hushed it up, just like they're doing now. And if it was a false flag, it would have been played up. I don't know the answer to the story, to that, but it's very.
All we know now is that the hot shutdown caused by this transformer failure caused a terror that the White House had. So we need to pay attention. More games on. Thank you, Chris. We'll